अस्सलाम वालेकुम स्टूडेंट्स, कैसे हैं आप? डूइंग वेल, वंडरफुल, आई एम फाइन टू। एक नया टॉपिक, एक नई बात और कुछ गपशप। आपसे गपशप तो रहती। वेल, टुडे वी आर टू अंडरस्टैंड मोर अबाउट a broadcasting house. A very peculiar thing about a broadcasting house. What do you think of a broadcasting house? Someone says a radio station. What comes to your mind? Well, in my youth, I'm still there. But you see, in my prime youth, when someone would mention radio station, what would come to my mind immediately would be a studio. Oh, I would fascinate. That was the age of radio, and we would listen more radio, very little of a television. I'm talking about early 70s. I will not go beyond that. So, the mention of a studio where you are listening so many things every day, sweet voices, dramatized things, a studio. And we would find someone to take to a studio and we would visit a studio. If you get a chance, you must also. But what comes to your mind is a studio. And today, we would be talking about studio, different type of studios, so that a student of broadcasting is familiar with what type of place or point it is from where all this comes into action. All right? At the beginning of a radio age, I would say, early part of the last century, it actually gradually settled. The radio made its mark very smoothly. In the first decade, the early part of first decade, there was a talk of radio and someone is saying, well, my voice would be heard miles away. And people are debating whether it would be. Oh, let's see. But gradually, this later part of the second decade of last century, radio was there and radio station was there. And then, it's a history. In a matter of years, there were so many radio stations all over the world because then they were made patent. Things were made patent. And once they are made patent, it became a sort of an industry. But in the beginning, when you would say radio station, the concept of a studio was a very ordinary room. Just shut the door, put curtains and silence. The range of the transmitter was limited. But sooner than later, it was realized that some very special treatment is required at the place, at the point you call radio station, just to make some very specific broadcast. And again, as we were discussing in the last lecture, was it last lecture? We were talking about noise. I think you remember better. It was noise we were talking last time. Yes. And to understand that the element of noise at the sender's end should not pose any problem to the listeners, because there had been complaints that the quality of the transmission or whatever it was at the receiver's end, there was quite an element of noise. Things were not properly understood. It was only the music you can enjoy, but the announcements, the newsreels and all those things, they were not as clearly heard as they are today. We would just find why. The concept of a studio was not like that, but gradually, almost all the radio stations, by the time it was 1930, they were quite equipped, and the concept was very clear that the point from where you broadcast should be little specific and very different. The first thing was to kill all the noise. As an announcer or broadcaster is talking into the microphone, all background noise should be killed to minimize the occurrence of that noise we discussed last time. Anything which hampers the true meaning of any communication to be carried to the receiver. And to this end, when the concept was strong, the effort was to ensure, and for this purpose, what they developed is called studio, a radio studio. You might have heard this word of studio these days for film production or so many channels and TV production. Some of your friend might be having a studio, and there are big studios. If you visit Karachi, have you seen Karachi? You must see it. It's a beautiful city, despite all those things. I mean, broken roads. It's a beautiful city. If you happen to be in Lahore, Islamabad, and Peshawar, Peshawar again is a lovely place where you would find a radio station. And very old, at the time of partition, there was a radio station. You must visit these places to find out what it looks like. But as we were talking of a studio, to make sure that there is a place where there is no noise and you can ensure that what is delivered is in its purest form as far as voice is concerned, the broadcaster. Well, studios came into being, and when radio stations were organizing their programs, they again felt one studio would not do. I mean, one type of studio. That would not do. You need to have different types of studios. Just as we were talking about the film studios or TV studios, if you ever happen to be there, you would find a different type of studios having different space, different equipment, lights, small rooms where films are made, rooms for the artists, makeup rooms, all those things. But at a radio station, one simple studio which was first thought about and actually created was a newsroom, because it was news where you needed more of a studio, because in musical programs, well, you can afford a bit of a noise, but in news, oh, silence, only a broadcaster and a newsreader's voice dominate over everything. Actually, there should be only the voice of a newsreader. First came into being news studio. Well, you can imagine it's a room with a very simplistic arrangement. Usually first, I may be telling you what the studio is like, is a room. The first thing you would notice when you enter a radio station's studio, even if it is as simple as a newsroom, you would notice on the walls, they're very different walls. They are not ordinary room walls. Some special substance has been placed on those walls. You may find floor covering. All these are sound absorbent. These special substances, they do not allow the sound waves in any form They may not be electromagnetic waves. We will be talking in the next lecture or the coming lectures. But the simple sound waves, these substances do not allow them to pass through. They have the enormous capacity to absorb them. Even if you put clothings and the heavy curtains, uh, sofas, all those things, they also work to absorb some voice. If it is an empty room, it will be having an echo. Oh, up. If you have got those clothes over there, you may not be getting an echo, whatever. So because they absorb the voice. At the studio, they in fact have a special substance placed all on the walls and some part on the floor. No tuck, tuck, tuck sound as you walk on the floor. Nothing like this. No. Sound is absorbed. Well, newsroom, uh, it's very much like this table. You have a microphone fitted, and a newsreader would sit at a distance told by the director how much distance. Now, normally, 1 foot is enough, or 18 inches in some cases. It depends on the microphone. It is fitted in the center of the table, and you have the space to put on papers like this, the script, news script, and you read out news. And one part of the room is a glass wall. There sits the producer. Producer and the broadcaster must have a direct contact so that if there is any communication, uh, if the broadcaster is deviating from the script or the producer wants some fill-in arrangement, they may have exchange of gestures, which you as a listener may never know what is going on between the broadcaster and the producer. They may be having some gestures just to adjust the broadcast. The news is a very simplistic arrangement. No one is allowed to enter the news studio. And there are not very many props. Props? Never heard about it. Haven't gone through video courses. No. Okay. Props. Props are the stray things. This pen, there may be a vase, and there may be different things which are there to make different uses. In a TV production, you would learn more about the props. I'm sitting here and you're watching me, and there is an almara behind me, and there are books. These are called props. I may be not using those books. I may be not touching even them, but still they are there. They're called props. In a newsroom, there are no such loose things because the producer does not want at any cost any noise. If something falls or it doesn't want any noise. So it is very tight newsroom. Only pieces of paper, broadcaster, microphone, a place for the director across the glass sheet. That's all. This is simplistic. In the early days of radio, not only the newsreel was read from this type of studios, but announcements, the important announcements, were also made from this type of arrangement. And one difference in the studio for this newsreels from radio stations, is that they have an arrangement for one person, just like I'm sitting here. You might have noticed in radio newsreels, generally, it is one person who reads out all the news items. Say if it is for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or even if it is for 15 minutes. One person would read out all the news. It's different structure from TV. You may be seeing newsreel broadcast from TV, and you would find two people sitting side by side, and sometime a third person for sports and another person for weather. There may be more people in a studio for a TV broadcast, but at a radio newsreel broadcast, essentially, you would find one person. So the arrangement is cut like that. You have a person, newscaster, newsreader, arrangements, and that's all. And you would enjoy, if you are a regular newsreader, sometime you would enjoy your place, because no one is allowed to interfere. It's your domain and it's all yours. But next, that is a little complex, because radio stations were not confined. They didn't like somehow to confine themselves to a studio like this, because the activity at radio station was not confined to music, the canned music, and the newsreels. There was more activity. As we had talked earlier in some lecture, the talk shows. Radio, because it was at one stage in communication, radio was so important that all the people who matter in different walks of life, like politicians, at the top of it, economists, financial wizards, educationists, and social scientists. بہت شدت سے ضرورت محسوس ہوئی کہ یہ لوگ جو ہیں، خود ان لوگوں کی بھی یہ خواہش ہوتی تھی کہ سنس ریڈیو از پرہیپس دی اسٹرانگیسٹ مین آف کمیونیکیشن دوز ٹائمس، خود ریڈیو کی یہ ضرورت محسوس ہوتی تھی کہ یہ لوگ جو ہیں وہ ہمارے ہاں آئیں اور ہمارے ہاں کسی بھی گیون ٹاپک پہ ایک لائیولی ڈسکشن ہو، سو دیٹ یو سی ایوری ریڈیو اسٹیشن بیسیکلی اسٹوڈنٹس وانٹیڈ ٹو بلڈ اپ اٹس آڈینس. صرف کیونکہ اس میں بہت سارا انٹرسٹ انوالو تھا. انٹرسٹ یہ بھی کہ کمرشل انٹرسٹ بھی تھا، تو بہت ساری چیزیں مل گئی. تو شدید خواہش تھی کہ اسٹوڈیو کے اندر کچھ لوگوں کو بلا کے ٹاک کریں. اب نیوز روم میں یا نیوز اسٹوڈیو میں تو یہ پاسبل نہیں تھا، کیونکہ وہ ظاہر ہے چھوٹی سی لمیٹڈ جگہ اور اس پہ اتنا نہیں تھا. اب ضرورت محسوس ہوئی کہ تھوڑا بڑا اسٹوڈیو ہو. اچھا، اسٹوڈیو بنانا کوئی بہت آسان کام ہے. یو نیڈ لاٹ آف منی ٹو سیٹ اپ اے اسٹوڈیو. اس کی جو فائنینشیل سائڈ ہے، کسی دن ہم بجٹ پہ بات کریں گے ریڈیو اسٹیشن کی، کہ اس کی بجٹنگ کیسی ہے اور پروگرامس کی بجٹنگ کیسی ہے، تو یو وڈ ریئلائز کہ یہ ایک مشکل سا فائنینشلی ایک مشکل سا کام ہے، اور آپ کو اس میں خاصے فائنینسز جو ہیں چاہیے ہوتے ہیں، پھر یہ پاسبل ہوتا ہے. اب اسٹوڈیو بنانا، ایک ایسا اسٹوڈیو جو ڈیوریبل ہو، جو ایک پرماننٹ شیپ لے لے، ایسا مشکل ہوتا ہے. لیکن ریڈیو اسٹیشن بیکاز دے کوڈ اسمیل لاٹ آف بزنس، ایز more activity would generate more business, more type of activity would generate more business. One driving force, I would say, was the money. Grow کرنے کے لیے ٹاک شوز کے لیے اب اسٹوڈیوز بنائے گئے. Now this time these studios were different. نیوز اسٹوڈیوز سے یہ ڈفرینٹ اسٹوڈیوز تھے. Obviously they were more in I would say size, more in size. اور سائز کے علاوہ جو ارینجمنٹ تھا وہ کچھ ایسا تھا کہ آپ ایک اس طرح کی ٹیبل لے کر سکیں اسٹوڈیو میں، جس کے اوپر آپ ایک سے زیادہ مائک رکھ سکیں. ویسے تو ایسے سینسٹیو مائکس جو تھے وہ تھے اس وقت بھی تھے، آج بھی ہیں، کہ دے کین گیٹ اے وائس فرام اے ڈسٹینس. بٹ اٹ از آلویز ایڈوائزبل ٹو میک ارینجمنٹ اف پاسبل کہ آپ وائس پہ کمپرومائز نہیں کریں گے. اینڈ رائٹلی سو، اس لیے کہ آواز ہی تو ہے جو آپ کا میڈیم بھی ہے، जिसके जरिए आप पैगाम पहुंचाना चाह रहे हैं। तो अब इन स्टूडियोज को बनाने में ऐसी अरेंजमेंट हुई कि आपका जो एंकर है, जो टैलेंट है, उसके बैठने की ऐसी पोजीशन हो जहाँ पे वो एक तो सबको कंट्रोल कर सके। इट वाज मोर लाइक विजुअल थिंग, बट यू हैव टू मेक इट ऑडियो। आपका आदमी यहाँ पे बैठे, एंकर जो है, ताकि वो बाकियों को बिल्कुल बराबर से सवाल कर सके, उनसे जवाब ले सके और डिबेट को भी कंट्रोल कर सके, और बाकी के लोग इस तरीके से बैठें कि माइक से उनका डिस्टेंस जो है ना, और ओवरऑल जो हार्मोनिक्स क्रिएट हों, हार्मोनिक्स वी विल टॉक इन डिटेल सम टाइम, जो सारी आवाजें वहां से पैदा हों, वो एक सिंगल साउंड के फॉर्म में लिसनर तक पहुंचे। लिसनर को ये ना लगे कि थिंग्स आर जम्बलिंग अप। उस जंबल अप में बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है चीज को समझना, आज भी बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता है। ऐसे स्टूडियोज टॉक शोज के लिए, डिस्कशंस के लिए बनाए गए। नॉर्मली द पीपल हु वर गोइंग टू रेडियो स्टेशंस, दे इन फैक्ट हैड इन माइंड के how to behave as they talk, because talking outside a studio is a different thing talking inside a studio, and then some directions from the director. You have to speak on your turn, or when the anchor person is in fact asking you for your remarks or your observations, only then you are supposed to be talking. All these arrangements had to be done, and then people were trained. All the people who were in the business of communication, in the sense who wanted to exploit communication for their own ends, the bankers, again I would say the politicians and other people, they all then learned it very quickly. The sooner they are in a radio station's building or they are in a studio, there are different people as they talk in a very parliamentary language, in a very disciplined manner, and you would find a very high quality discussions at the radio stations. If I recount it from my early times, I still believe I had the opportunity of listening to some very, very high quality radio discussions. People are talking in a highly disciplined manner on their turn and explaining to the length they think it's now adequate. I mean, it was quite sensible listening and getting the point after 20 minutes talk show or discussion from most radio stations. And Radio Pakistan, I should say, was not behind. It was second to none, as it is said, in having good radio discussions, very disciplined and high quality pieces of communication. It is because of some people's effort that we have a very good network of radio stations and now FM stations. All they have learned from those people, legendary people, very learned people we had at our radio business. But anyways, coming to the studios. The activity was then not confined to having a news studio and a talk show studio. The one product of broadcasting, a very, very interesting piece of broadcasting, which actually gave radio stations a color of its own, were the radio dramas. Very soon, like discussions and current affairs, radio dramas were those early broadcasting products which earned a name for themselves, which in fact carved out a place for themselves. All broadcasting stations all over the world, there was hardly an exception that a broadcasting house is not having dramas. We will be having a separate lecture or a little more on radio dramas, and we will see what the radio drama means. But here, we are talking about a studio. Now, to produce a drama, you need a studio, a radio drama, a very specific studio. The talk show studio where a table is laid and all those arrangements to help the people who are talking, and a news studio that would not suffice the need for a drama studio to make a drama. What to do? Well, the only answer was to have a studio. So it was a need which pushed the radio people, the broadcasting houses, again think of another studio, another type of studio. And this time, it was a studio meant to record dramas. Now, at a studio which is meant for recording dramas, they are different. They have been different ever since. You see, how a drama is recorded. Mostly, the performers are standing around a mic. Now, you see, we will talk one day different types of mics. Some mics are open from all sides and some are not open ends. All ends are not open. We will talk about those mics. But special mics are required to record special effects. All mics are not competent enough to do the job. So in a drama where the directors are very particular about very small things like you have to record this breathing sound. You need a microphone of a different nature. And there is a character who has to speak very loudly. They have to say something very loud. You have to control that voice in a microphone. But voice has to be uttered. Now you see the whole lot of performers is standing around a microphone and everybody is holding, I just give you an example, well, like this. Everybody is holding its script. They have rehearsed it before it is recorded. Rehearsed it a dozen times or even more for days, because drama at one stage became the backbone of radio programs. People would hear more to these dramas. They would wait because dramas created so much interest. The series and the serials, long plays and the plays on one topic, they created so much of interest at the prime time of radio that people would wait for it. So, to make a drama was really very enthusiastic, very challenging job for the directors. Rehearsed. Now everybody is holding this script and no one is allowed to create. No. You can't face the outrage of a director if you are doing this. No. Very silent. And they have to say the dialogues as it is written here. I may not perform like a performer, but it was something like this. You have to read it out according to the punctuations. Everybody is holding it. Now everybody is standing. Contrary to the talk shows where everybody is sitting across a table. But the drama artist, however great or however big your name is, you have to be standing around a microphone, saying your lines as have been told. And you see, the drama is not based on the voices of the performers alone. You must have noticed. And notice you must. A drama always has sound effects. You can't live without noticing it. Drop off something. Third of a footstep or anything created by other than the human voice. No drama possible with only human voice. You need to have sport of musical notes, musical effects. If you are keen to watch films, you would find if there is no music in a film, how it would appear, sort of thing. If there is no sound effect in a radio drama, it's very dry, it's very boring. Uh, Sounds like something very a horror play. I mean, that is not all the time intended. Now, the people who are supposed to be giving the sound effects, you see, these age of CDs and all availability of sound effects, those were not the times. The people, the musicians, the group of musicians, I would say, handled by one senior producer who would create sounds according to the script. Now, they would be sitting by the side of the performers at some distance. Another microphone was required there and is required there to get the effects of sound. At some time, it was manual effect. We would study something like this in the advertisement section. Advertisement as a piece of broadcasting. We would find how these sounds are created for certain effects and make the communication effective. You see, all we are focused on communication, mass communication, and broadcasting is one subject which helps us understand what this communication means when it comes to electronic media. But basically, it's communication. You are communicating through sound, through words, through different effects, manual effects. So, you would have a table laid for the musicians for sound effects, along with the voice. All that is written on a script where to give a certain sound effect, chirping of a bird, the flow of a river, or strong wind blowing through thick jungle, or in a desert, or amongst mountains, or in a valley. Oh wow, those were the days. I still have something in my mind. How interesting it used to be to listen to a radio drama along with your family. Still, people listen to radio dramas on because of these TV channels. It has lost some listenership, but still people live. But at the prime time, and even in the childhood, listening to drama meant for children is so amazing a thing. But we are talking about the studio, news studio, studio for talk shows, and studio for drama. Drama, particularly, required a different type of studio. The console. We will talk more about the console. Is a board where all the sound goes for manipulation or for different effects. We will study more about all these technical things at a lecture where we will talk more about the equipment we use at a broadcasting house. But here, the console box is there, the director is there, and the performers are there, and the studio looks little different. Things were not confined to, that was not the end of the road, to have a studio or to make a radio drama. That was not the end of the road, students. Radio kept doing more and more in the area of electronic communication and covered many. In fact, it surpassed many barriers and made this communication fluent, effective, engulfing more and more areas. That was possible because the communication at broadcasting houses was made strong. All these elements of news and talk shows and dramas, they were all focused in making communication strong. There was no other purpose. All the side products, the entertainment and all those things and information, they were just came in between. Basic thing ever since the existence of human being. Communication has been the hallmark of human interaction. Well, studios. One more. There came a stage when radio stations felt that canned music, recorded music, is perhaps not enough to fulfill the requirement of people and different segments like the advertisers. Even the radio people felt themselves, they needed more. Radio stations, they wanted to create something which belonged to radio. It is not that something has been recorded at a public place and you have recorded there and there is a film song, or someone has sung a ghazal at some darbar and you have recorded it and now you are airing it for the entertainment of people or on public demand, as it is said. ऐसा चल भी सकता था, but the radio people thought in a different way. They wanted to have some music which is labeled as a music arranged or produced by the radio station itself. For instance, this is music produced by Lahore station. This is a music produced by Karachi station. This is a music produced by some other station. You see, there was a sense of pride. And in fact, there were competitions and awards were given for having a good music recorded for the entertainment of people and for the sake of music. What to do? The answer was the same as it has been all the time. When there is a requirement, you can fulfill this gap by doing more. And this time, it was fulfilled by having a different studio. Now I'm saying a different studio for producing music which is your own, which is radio station's own. Well, it was a great change. You are calling the big names of the time. Well, if to quote a few, Mehdi Hasan आ रहे हैं रेडियो स्टेशन पे, मैडम नूरजहां जैसी अजीम फनकार रेडियो स्टेशन में आ रही हैं, बड़े बड़े म्यूजिशियंस आ रहे हैं वहाँ पे, उस्ताद फतेह अली खान और सारे जो लोग हमारे इंतहाई काबिल एहतराम और बहुत ही जिन्होंने हमारे मुल्क के लिए इतना कुछ किया, और उनका नाम जो है आई होप रहती दुनिया तक रहेगा, उनकी इतनी कंट्रीब्यूशन है, वो रेडियो पाकिस्तान में आ रहे हैं. अब उनके लिए स्पेशल स्टूडियो बन चुके हैं. अब क्या है, वहाँ पर टेबल चेयर नहीं है और ना ही वो अरेंजमेंट है जो ड्रामा रिकॉर्ड करने के लिए है कि आपने जिस माइक जो है वो हैंग किया है और सब उसके गिर जो है वो बात कर रहे हैं. म्यूजिक के लिए if my memory goes well, म्यूजिक के लिए गाँव तकिए लगे हुए हैं और जो साजिंदे हैं, जो म्यूजिशियन का ग्रुप है, उनके बैठने की एक अरेंजमेंट अलग से है और जो सिंगर हैं उनके लिए एक छोटा सा प्लेटफॉर्म बना हुआ है टू गिव एन ऑनर टू द सिंगर। वो वहाँ पर बैठेंगे और उसी तरह शीशे के ग्लास के क्रॉस जो म्यूजिक के प्रोड्यूसर हैं, म्यूजिक के प्रोड्यूसर बिल्कुल डिफरेंट होते थे, who would have the sense of music. ऑर्डिनरी प्रोड्यूसर्स का ये जॉब भी नहीं था और ना ही उन्हें कभी असाइन भी किया गया। जनरली ये वो लोग करते हैं जिन्हें म्यूजिक का सेंस होता है। वो उसी तरह बैठे हुए हैं और फिर रिहर्सल्स हो रही हैं वहाँ पे। The atmosphere was very different from all those studios. It was a delight to sit in any corner of that studio and watch the great people creating music, composing music, dealing with the ghazals of Ghalib and Faiz, और जब मेहदी हसन साहब ने गज़ल रिकॉर्ड कराई, गुलों में रंग भरे, बादे नौ बहार चले. It was a great, great time for the radios to get this type of music, which would never die. Radio ki contribution, it was possible only because what we are talking, because they had this arrangement of studios. A broadcasting house sends without studio means nothing. You have studios. Well, students, we need to understand arrangement of microphones. You see, in a news studio, it is very simple. You just put a microphone over there and the news reader is reading out the script and listeners are getting what the message is. But it is entirely different when we go to a music studio. One reason, there are more people. It is not a singer alone who needs a microphone. There are other people who need a microphone. For instance, the musicians. And sometimes there is a partition among the musicians. For instance, the person who is playing tabla and harmonium, they may require a different mic because the producer of that song, Geet or Ghazal, he requires a very clear sound of tabla or all the keys punched on the harmonium. इसी तरह जो वायलिनिस्ट हैं, क्योंकि वायलिन आपको पता है कि अब यू हैव टू कैच दैट सुर जो लगाते हैं उसमें करने का, सो यू हैव टू हैव अ सेपरेट माइक्रोफोन ओवर देयर. आप चाहे तो उनके सामने रख दें, चाहे उनके ऊपर हैंग कर दें, वट एवर द अरेंजमेंट यू मेक. म्यूजिक स्टूडियो जो है उसके अंदर एक तो लोगों के बैठने की अरेंजमेंट जो है वो थोड़ी डिफरेंट है, और साथ ही साथ स्टूडेंट उसमें जो माइक्रोफोन की अरेंजमेंट है वो इट इज़ वेरी डिफरेंट. सो म्यूजिक स्टूडियोज was one great addition to to these radio stations all over the world. It was a very common phenomenon. You need to have a very specialized studio for these music programs, musical shows. Well, we are talking about studio students because I wanted to give you some idea that it is not one studio that a radio station has and you are doing something from there. No, you have different studios. And you see, the studio from where you are broadcasting in real time is also marked with a red plate outside, marked with two words, on air. If you are at a radio station and you find, oh, on air, never ever try to touch the door. You may feel some embarrassment. Don't do that. Which means that this is a studio which is sending a transmission right now. It may be a music, it may be a speech, it may be news, it may be anything, but it is going on from here. There may be many studios, but this is a studio marked with the word and glowing on air. That means you need to be very, very silent. Right, like this. On air studio. Well, this is a concept of different studios. There is a cluster of these facilities at a broadcasting house. And that makes things convenient for any radio station to. But you may be asking a question, and that I believe must be ringing somewhere in your mind. What about these FM radio stations? Well, we will be talking more, uh, uh, moving from a traditional broadcasting house to a modern day broadcasting house, including FMs. We will be talking in a separate lecture because that is a rather different entity. We are talking about a traditional broadcasting house with so many facilities of recording and sending things on air. Then there are certain other studios like VIP studios. For instance, Prime Minister or President has to come to Radio Pakistan to address the nation. There is always a separate studio to facilitate the very, very important person to prepare themselves for the speech to the nation. It's a different arrangement altogether. And there are occasions in our daily national life when a president or the prime minister, they need to talk to the nation and take people into confidence on certain issues like some economic issue, some political issue. I mean, it may be any social issue, and it may be an issue pertaining to the foreign affairs. अब ये एक ऐसी जगह है जहाँ पर आप ये रिस्क नहीं ले सकते कि वो स्टूडियो में आएँ और पता चले जी स्टूडियो में कोई माइक्रोफोन ख़राब है तो वो ज़रा वेट कर लें और ज़रा माइक्रोफोन ठीक हो जाए. ऐसे नहीं, ऐसे उनके साथ ये ट्रीटमेंट हो नहीं सकती. अगर आप ये कहेंगे जी इस वक्त स्टूडियो के अंदर फ़लाँ चीज़ जो है वो ठीक होने वाली है, रिकॉर्डिंग सिस्टम जो है वो ठीक नहीं है या लीड मिसिंग है, तो ये इस तरह की चीज़ें वीआईपी के साथ आपने वीआईपी स्टूडियो कुछ ऐसा नहीं है कि उसके अंदर को बहुत बड़े बड़े सोफे पड़े हुए हैं और वो एक बड़ा आप ये समझेंगे लग्जोरियस किस्म का, ये नहीं. रेडियो के अंदर वीआईपी स्टूडियो मीन्स एक ऐसा स्टूडियो जो इक्विपमेंट के लिहाज से बिल्कुल रेडी है. वहाँ पे जो इक्विपमेंट पड़ा हुआ है दिस इज़ फॉर श्योर वो बिल्कुल फंक्शनल है, वर्किंग ऑर्डर में है. और किसी भी वक्त जो देखें वीआईपीज़ की मूवमेंट ये तो नहीं होगी कि वो आपको बता के आएंगे जी 4 बजे उनका कोई काम शुरू हो, ऐसा तो नहीं है. दे जस्ट वांट टू टॉक टू पीपल एंड रेडियो station is perhaps the most handy thing available to them. Then there are mobile studios. Sometimes you have to be outdoor. And if you are doing this frequently, like you are going to a stadium, say 20 times a year to cover a cricket test match, you also have an arrangement of a mobile studio. You go there and you put across something which converts the place into a studio. This type of arrangement is also frequently done by the radio stations which are engaged for running commentary of these matches. And now again, students, one or two, we have time to talk about one or two terms. We keep on learning terms bit by bit. Filter, we were talking last time. I think it was filter. Filter on a microphone. You fit a filter on a microphone to change its tone. At time, mainly in the dramas, you need to give some different sound to different effect to a sound, a tonal effect, I would say. Certain filters are just in cameras. You use different color filters to give a different effect. Horror, pleasing, night. When you give a blue filter over there, and the yellow for different colors. But in microphones, filter you use for tonal effects. If you want to give a little tone, changed tone in a person's voice, it could be with my voice. You use a specific filter. There are different varieties of filter who would in fact squeeze your voice, or they would blur your voice in a different way. There is a range of filters. You apply the filter desired by the director who want certain voice in a certain range of a pitch. This is about filter. And there was another term, fluff, F-L-U-F-F. You would find it in your notes. Fluff is a reading error. When you make a reading error in your script, the director may be telling you, why are you fluffing? Don't fluff. There shouldn't be any fluff. Fluff means there shouldn't be any reading error. You should be reading it straight, correct, as you have been told. So this much is about the terminology. This time we will be talking about dramas. As we have talked about the drama studios, we would be talking about drama is a lengthy subject, but is a very interesting subject as far as broadcasting is concerned. Next time with more ideas and more on what broadcasting stores for us to talk between you and me. Keep in touch with me. Keep on writing. Keep on asking. You have got my email address, telephone numbers, web pages, online. Everything is in your grasp. Do exploit all what is in your hands for your own benefit. Till next time, it's Khuda Hafiz.